My name is Lee Hall. I've had some revelations this year on living in the Anthropocene. I've been coming here and doing this work with Vegan Summerfest with NAVs since 2004, believe it or not. This is my 20th year. Has anybody heard this year about the debate about naming a new geological era? Human-dominated era. The Anthropocene, if we leave the Holocene and go into a new era called the Anthropocene, that means it's a human-dominated Earth. People are hesitant to face that or acknowledge that. And that's one reason probably there's pushback against naming the era, although scientists are using that word. So Kathy Pollard said that the debate is partly about how far the time goes back. And we're going to be talking about that today. So the second half is sort of like gets right to that debate of how far the time goes back, but I'm going to do some leading up to it from a vegan perspective. And then we'll get to the debate that they're having. So this is an art installation, all made from plastic bottles. It's all plastic. I thought it was interesting to see, you know, if you were going to exemplify the Anthropocene, that you'd use plastic. But you'd use horses that look like they're horses from way back before horses were ever domesticated. They look like Taki horses. And there are a few Taki horses in Mongolia. Never been tamed, never been domesticated, but only a few. And they're just hanging on to a little bit of a little area of Mongolia. And most of us have never seen what a horse looks like before being domesticated, purpose-bred. And as Bill Drellis, who is here, said to me when I was putting this together, Bill looked at that picture and said, how much of the human-dominated era comes from our use of horses, when you think about it. How much that we did to get what we think of as civilization or progress came from the purpose breeding of these beings. So there's a lot going on here. Here they are. You see what I mean about the shapes of the heads? How they resemble the Taki? These are the Taki horses, and these are what horses look like, living on their own terms, evolving on their own terms. Good to get an idea of an untamed being. And you can go to YouTube and find videos of the Taki horses in Mongolia. I found this a striking example of the Anthropocene. This is a herd of 40 elephants, or it was at the time this picture was taken. And they wait for the rubbish tip. That's how they survive. Some of them fell ill and died from eating toxins, plastics. And when that happened, the people from the rubbish dump, they put a moat around it. And what happened then? The elephants started raiding the village. Obviously, they're starving. You can see the birds too, you know, feeding off waste materials that we've left. There's so few untamed elephants left on the face of the earth, and you see what this group in Sri Lanka is reduced to. So it was covered by the press. This is ABC News in Australia, and you see they say Sri Lanka digs moat around the rubbish tip to keep the hungry elephants out. And the concern is that the human-elephant conflict will get worse, and we lose elephants that are a national asset. So you see their description, the way they value the elephants is an anthropocentric value, right? They're a national asset. This is an elephant. See the eyes? And see how they're thinking of the value of elephants as decorative, as a cultural element. I think this picture speaks for itself. And not only are we seeing scenes like this, but also the heat. You see the element of this primate looking for water. Our effect on the planet. At the same time, we're taking up habitat and changing the trajectory of evolution of other beings, of other living communities. We're also creating a hellish, literally, environment for so many living communities. And that complicates the Anthropocene. Now, some have pushed back against whether we should be naming something the Anthropocene. And one well-known commentator is Naomi Klein. And so here's a quote. This is 2016. Klein could have changed opinions, I don't know, but I found this quote in London Review of Books. And it was about the debate in 2016, now we were talking, and about naming a new era. And Naomi Klein weighs in and says, this is a diagnosis that erases the very existence of human systems that organize life differently. Systems that insist that humans must think 7 generations in the future, must be not only good citizens, but good ancestors, must take no more than they need, and give back to the land in order to protect and augment the cycles of regeneration. So we see what Naomi Klein is saying. Not all humans, so not all humans, but just the ones who are in charge, was the comment. Now, responding to Naomi Klein, I'd like to point out, this is from the Wellcome Collection of Art. This is from circa 2000 before the current era. And guess who's there? Cows. 2,000 years ago. And then if I go to Wikipedia and look up animal husbandry, it has a long history, starting with the Neolithic Revolution when animals were first domesticated around 13,000 before the current era. So yes, all humans, right? Before farming. This is how far we go back through the thread of our ancestries into a human-dominated Earth. We're talking about altering the course of evolution for the ancestors of cattle. And we're looking at it in a tomb of ancient Egypt. Who are cows? Remember I was talking about the horses and the importance of looking at horses before they were ever purpose-bred? Who are cows? They're descendants of some of the most formidable animals on Earth. The aurochs, that's single or plural, aurochs, is one or a group. Humans develop breeding technologies to make them smaller, turn them into our underlings, fence them in, kill them, eat their flesh, and drink what we could pull from their teats. By the 1600s, we had killed off the last of their free-living ancestors. There are no cattle who are naturally evolving on the face of the earth anymore. Not even the little group like the Taki horses. There are no aurochs left. Aurochs are extinct. A poacher in Poland killed the last one off in the early 1600s. There have been attempts to breed back cows into aurochs. It's called Heck cattle because there was a pair of brothers from Germany, and their name is Heck, and they tried to breed back cows to make them bigger and try to make them, go back, bring back aurochs, basically. Back breeding, it's called. And they have never quite succeeded. And who would want to be an aurochs in that position, where you're basically living under control of a scientific experiment? So for all practical purposes, no, they're extinct, they're gone.
Do you know the size of them?
Like double the size of a cow? The question is it like GMO? GMO would be more technical than this. This is what we've been doing for many, many, many centuries. But yes, the trajectory, yes, did lead to cloning, genetically modified organism. That's where we went with purpose breeding, yes. So the question is, you would just take the smallest of the cow and then breed them, or the most docile animals, and we're breeding them to be heat resistant. We're taking cows from India, and we're still doing it, yes indeed. Here is, again, to Naomi Klein's point. These reindeer herders, by the way, the first ever domesticated animal that I can find, going back the furthest, before 13,000, before the current era, possibly as far as 14,000, were the reindeer. Here you have indigenous reindeer herders, and it says, shows a herd on its annual migration. So yeah, reindeer would go on an annual migration, but not under the, you see how they have, some of them have neck bands, and you see right there, and you see the people preparing them for the migration. That is completely human controlled. So back to Naomi Klein. Are there some people who lived in harmony with nature? Perhaps, but does that mean there's no Anthropocene? They were purpose breeding reindeer for, for generation after generation after generation. So my point is, it's probably not fair to romanticize people and say some had nothing to do with the Anthropocene, because all of our ancestries go back to domesticating non-human beings. The human beings, the comment is, used to follow the herds, but then it became humans in charge of them, and then domestication.
Right.
Humans began purpose breeding sheep between 11,000 and 9,000 before the current era. I want to bring up this face because we want to know who they are without our hands on their necks. Here's who they are, the mouflon. And they evolved naturally around the Caspian Sea. So for where Iran is and Turkey today, those were the mouflon. And what happens is breeders dropped and dragged them around the world, to Europe, to Africa, and beyond. Of course, we have sheep here. We have sheep all over the world. But they only came from this little place, little area around the Caspian Sea. So you see how we have completely altered them. So when we see a baby lamb in a booklet, and we say, oh, let's make a connection through that with other people. Let's, show them the cute lamb. Why would we eat this cute lamb? That becomes a way of saying, why don't you go vegan? Because who would eat a cute lamb? And I agree with that. When I see a cute lamb, I would say, isn't it like ridiculous that we would want to kill somebody that cute and sweet and fluffy and innocent? But there's a deeper issue in or a deeper query that veganism presents. And that's not just why we would eat this cute lamb, but it's why we made those mouflon into a being who looks like this. It's a deeper question. Why do we have control over these beings, and who were they before we had our hands on their necks? So this baby sheep appears vulnerable, small, needing care, separate and apart from other sheep, away from freedom, away from community, because of centuries of manipulation. And when you know this, when you look at that face, then you say, first you say cute, would never eat, but then you say, wait, what have we done? What have we done to make this living community so vulnerable? Mouflon communities are considered a threatened species today. Agribusiness robbed them of their evolution, their interconnected biological communities, and their very existence, because they're barely hanging on. Now we're at the part where we're going to talk about the debate. This one is in 2024. So this just came out this year. Geologists reject the Anthropocene as the Earth's new epoch after 15 years of debate. So here it is covered in Nature, this is a scientific journal, and they're explaining, but some are now challenging the vote, saying there were procedural irregularities. Here's the lake near Toronto, Canada, where scientists have found evidence in the sediment of the lake of human influence over the earth and how it has actually got into the sediment of this lake, particularly plutonium from nuclear testing in 1952. That's part of the timing that Kathy brought up. The working group to name the Anthropocene decided on the basis of what they found. They were going to start the Anthropocene in 1952, that was very recent. So how can they name, that's what you were getting at. Kathy is nodding. They wanted to put that like ground zero as the Anthropocene. They just wanted a starting point to say, okay, we'll point to this. So it was chosen to represent the Anthropocene. Humans must have put the plutonium there. Yes, they actually traced it to bomb tests. So the official Anthropocene working group focuses on physical evidence of human-caused changes, and they decided they wanted to start the Anthropocene in 1952 with that plutonium finding. They were looking for microplastics and pesticides and all these evidences of humanity's influence on the earth. And so they said, well, if we pick this scientifically, we can show that humans have altered the earth to the extent that you can find it in the sediment of the earth. So the question was plutonium chosen because it's made by humans, it can't be made naturally? Those fallout particles they could find, they knew were human created. Yeah, if they could find evidence that what they were finding was altered, chemically by humans, then they would count that as evidence of the Anthropocene. So you see the debate here? The debate here is, this really happened. This happened this year. They decided, no, we're going to throw out the Anthropocene because they were arguing over 1952. It's sort of like Naomi Klein saying, we don't all do this. There are, Native American people who live thinking 7 generations ahead. True, but that doesn't mean that indigenous people were hands off of all other animals and didn't change the course of their evolution. That's incorrect, is how I'm feeling this. Is anybody feeling like Naomi Klein? Okay, Bill is bringing out a nuance here. There are some indigenous people who had nothing to do with the Anthropocene. We just can't say, oh, okay, so in that sense, Naomi Klein could be correct. There could be people on the face of the earth who had nothing to do with, they just gathered herbs and plants. Okay, the question was, there's a debate, and debates are, one side is right and one side is wrong, but how can they bring this debate together and explore? So we're doing that now. And I like the pushback. I like the advocate for Naomi Klein. I think that brings out a nuance here, that we could look into various indigenous people and whether they did have this awareness that we don't want to change the course of evolution for any other communities. Kathy. So basically, Kathy is saying that would be a corner case. If there were any indigenous people who didn't alter the course of evolution of other animals, that doesn't negate the idea that humanity in general has changed the course of evolution for all other animals and ourselves. Mm-hmm. I think we're the only self-selected, self-domesticated species. The comment is, part of this debate is if you were to recognize the Anthropocene era, just as you were to recognize climate crisis, politicians say, well, then we would have to do something about it. So we're going to deny that it is a reality. The comment is that there's a collective responsibility. And just because I, as an individual, am not doing perfect, I'll tell you an analogy of that comes to me right away. Just because I'm not doing something directly doesn't mean that I'm not part of the collective responsibility. I stopped driving last June, totally. I never want to see my hand on a fuel pump again, any earlier than I would ever want to see my hand wrapped around a gun. I can't do it anymore. And one of the things that felt good was knowing that I wouldn't have the anxiety of hitting a deer. And I know a lot of people who have hit a deer, and I realized that the road was built for me. Collectively, I had that responsibility, and then I studied more about the amphibians, the invertebrates that we kill on the road without even knowing it, and I realized how many animals I had been killing every day. And that goes back to the roads, the infrastructure, the fragmentation, the sprawl. That was all, yes, I was responsible because it was built for me as part of the collective beneficiaries of this road system. So I thought it was hilarious that this argument came down to if 1952. You know, 1952 is so recent that I Love Lucy's first show was on in 1952. That's how recent. 1952. But Hasbro was selling Mr. Potato Head, a plastic toy that turned kids into TV advertising customers.
The first one did not include the head. He actually took an actual potato.
That's right. That's right. You had pieces to put in. Okay. The comment was, the original Mr. Potato Head was, you just took a potato from your kitchen and it was just like a set of ears and nose and feet, like little shoes. And yeah, they were plastic bits though you put in. By 1952, according to a study guide from the Michigan Farm Bureau, the first herringbone parlor helped farmers move a row of cows together for milking in one clean space. So how advanced was our domination over living communities by 1952? So going back to Kathy and the time issue of this, I hope what we've seen so far brings up the idea that if we go back a lot further, we can make a case that the Anthropocene is in full swing. And so I think I'd like to make the case that humans entered our current late stage of hyper self-domestication by the time pet keeping became popular in the Elizabethan era. You know that before the 1800s, pet keeping was a nobility thing. It started in the palaces where they had pets. And the reason it was a nobility thing to have pets was it was conspicuous consumption. If you had pets, that said you had more food than you needed to eat or to feed your family. So you were showing off that you could afford to have animals to feed just to amuse you. And that was in the 1800s. So I would say that we could trace our timing of this stage, and I'm going to call it the late stage of self-domestication that we're in now. Around then, around when, because that got us to beyond domestication for what we might argue were human needs, and it went into human amusement, breeding animals who just suited our whims or kept us company. We might say that the Anthropocene was fully fledged way before the 1800s. Does anybody remember, yes, I know, hands are gonna come up. Alex Santilli. I promised Patricia Ferry, who was at that time Patricia Tricker, a good friend of Alex's, who stayed. Patricia came to Summerfest and stayed with Alex, and they came together to Summerfest. They were very, very good friends, you know, a friendship that spanned the ocean. And so Patricia came here from England. It was wonderful. I knew Patricia for many, many years before that as a trustee of the Vegan Society in England. So I told Patricia, I'm going to quote you, and I'm going to make sure that we also mention our very good mutual friend, Alex Santilli. So I'm looking at this picture. I think you can see why Patricia said this. At the current rate, the Anthropocene won't last long, and you get what Patricia was thinking. I mean, we threaten with extinction. This is from the IUCN Red List. International Union for the Conservation of Nature is an international group that keeps a running list of animals threatened with extinction. And it's incomplete because we don't know all the species on Earth. We haven't enumerated them all. But you can see here, mammals, 26%, amphibians, 41%. At this rate, when we know we're connected with all life, and when we know a butterfly is flapping wings here, that it's felt all over the earth, that everything is connected, how can we go on? How much longer can we go on in this state of affairs? The percentage threatened with extinction. So they're alive. The 12% of 100% of bird communities, 12% are threatened with extinction. But look at this. Going back to the roads and the fragmentation, amphibians, what's the greatest threat to amphibians? Part of it is microplastics, part of it is being hit by cars. Common toads, 90% of them will die crossing the road if it's a road where there's a car every 60 seconds. Okay, that's a road where there's a car every minute, which is not a very busy road. The common toads, 90% of them will die on that road. So you imagine how we're fragmenting the face of the planet, and amphibians are taking a huge burden from this, and we don't even see them. And so that's the whole thing about going further. Like, let's make a car that uses a battery instead of an internal combustion engine. But does that get us out of the fragmentation problem? Does that get us out of the sprawl problem? Does somebody know when they're driving an electric car that if there's common toads, this is what's going on? I never thought about it before until I stopped driving. It's interesting, like when I became vegan 40 years ago, there was then things I could allow myself to think about, because at that point I had divested. So then I could do critiques of them. And in the same way now, 40 years later, after I've given up driving, I can really it was research that got me to give up driving, but now I can do research, learn more about it, because I know that I've made that leap, that I've divested from it. So I'm looking at this in terms of the roads, in terms of the Anthropocene, and they are the big threat to amphibians. I pick it out because it's true. This is from Unchained TV, and I pick it out because it's true. The earth is burning, right? California wildfires. Insurance companies are leaving California because of they won't insure homes. They're leaving Florida because of the floods and the stronger storms. And the clock is ticking, but it's been ticking for a long, long time. And we're realizing it now when it's coming to a head. And the question is, and I think I've heard like murmurs of it in this room, the question becomes, what is the action that we may need to take? What is the catalyst? What is going to move us to try to become a member of humanity that divests itself from the constant domination of other living communities? What will the catalyst be inside us? And I have read recently some research that I'm not going to bring in here because it would be kind of a little tangent, but I'm reading about catalysts that make people change. And they compared fear of something terrible happening with awe. And the research shows that awe, I was surprised, awe is the catalyst. Awe has the biggest chance of shifting something inside us so that we not only take in the information, which is important, it's important to have the data, to have the receipts, to know what we're talking about, but there's something about an internal shift. And I found it this morning, and I find it here every year I come on the bird walks. Michael Zager, who is here, and I are working on a book which will be done in who knows when, sometime in the Anthropocene era. And, and this is Dr. Ted Barnett, right? Does everybody know about the bird walk tomorrow at 6? It will shift. It will shift you. It will make you feel awe. And Michael Zager's photos of birds will make you feel awe. Ted Barnett is going to put them up on a website. What's the name of it? Blue Dot? Pale Blue Dot. Pale Blue Dot. And Ted Barnett is going to put Michael Zager's just gallery of gorgeous, mainly birds, but also other animals. And I have found, I lead a hike every Wednesday night in Valley Forge National Historical Park in Pennsylvania. I have found, and I feel it, it's like when people are on a hike and they hear the wood thrushes, they want to protect that park. They want to protect that habitat. And I explain that those birds are in decline. And I explain why. People who know, who love a biocommunity, people who are in awe of the other living communities that they get to know, want to hear more about what they can do. They want to take action. So it's not fear of climate crisis, I think, so much as the awe of our planet and wanting to preserve it, loving it, respecting it like from the deepest place in our soul. That's what's going to shift us. So the politicians aren't working at that level. How do we get them to feel? The comment is the people who need to feel it, how do we get them to feel it? And I think that part of the key is understanding the biocommunity wherever we are, going outside. You remember George Eisman and those walks and how we could eat the clover? Remember those? That's awe. And that we carry with us. And that we can learn to share with others. And you go out on this bird walk with Ted Barnett tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock, and you learn, and you get the Merlin app, and you teach yourself, and then you'll be able to share with others that song. What's that song? What's that song that's like a piper? It's like a piper in the woods. That's a wood thrush. And that awe, that love is what will change all of us. That's the catalyst that will change all of us back to collective. Each one of us is part of a collective of humans. And each one of us, as we transform internally, is part of humanity's understanding. We represent humanity. Our understanding can help shift at a species level. Whether humans have a chance. As Patricia Ferry said, at this rate, the Anthropocene will not last long. We are connected to these biocommunities. And when we try to understand, we can't do it because we've always lived in these hyper self-domesticated bodies. So we can't do it. But we can strive to become a member of a biocommunity. We can strive to consume less, live in a smaller space, not have to eat our protein by pulling it through other animals and then eating the production of animal agribusiness, eating directly from the crops, to the extent that we can do bird walks, to the extent that we walk to the grocery store with a backpack, if we can. Everyone's in a different situation, physically and socially, but to the extent that we can, what makes you feel like a primate who respects the other living communities in our greater biocommunity? And I'll tell you, the bird walk makes me feel like a primate. When I'm in primate mode, I feel it. I feel that connection. And even if this is all too big for me, again, collective, I'm a representative of humanity. How much in my day, in my life, what's left for me on Earth, how much can I get that good feeling of understanding that I'm part of my greater biocommunity, that I'm doing to the extent possible no harm, and that I have a sense of awe? How much am I living in that moment of awe? How much can I do it? How much can I then inspire others to come with me, experience it this way? When we're hiking in the park, saying, you're a primate. That's why you can see so many shades of green. You know that you're connected. You're not alone. You're supposed to feel that way, connected to life. It's like when I have depression and anxiety, what I have to do, I have to hear a wood thrush. I have to. So it's about a mile. I am from the National Historical Park, Valley Forge, and I can get there. They're only here for the season, and I just soak it up. That's a vaccine, you know? Soak it up, right? That's what I need. That's what I need for my health, to keep me healthy all year, right? Just soak it up and then live like their habitat is everything, because it is. I can't bear to think of the woods without that song of those pipers. I can't bear an earth without wood thrushes. And it's that makes me want to live simply and makes me want to rewild myself to the extent possible, and makes me look back at the early definition of veganism and say, they got it. That's where they were going.
There's some people in the vegan movement that, due to predation in the natural world, believe that it's more vegan to actually take over the natural world, in a sense, and concrete, for lack of better words, the jungles, essentially, because less harm due to predation. What do you think about that kind of stuff?
So there is a group of people, and I don't think it's very large, but it's vocal. You're saying basically that they want to eliminate predation, and they're trying to end suffering, in a sense, in nature. Yes, there is a train of thought like that. I think it's completely misguided. Predation, look at our society. We live long lives, and at the end of them, we don't know how to go. We don't have any natural predators. We've lost that as primates. And so we wind up heavily medicalized, with people trying to make decisions for us, agonizing over how to do it. Just as we do with our pets who are hyper-domesticated, right? We're making these decisions. I remember going in with one of my rescued cats who was at the end, and the doctor, wonderful vet, but I said, but Quimby's looking out the window. Quimby's looking out the window. And the doctor said, yeah, but do you want to wait until Quimby can't look out the window? I said, but it's natural. No, not natural, not natural. You rescued this cat once, now rescue this cat again. If the cat were natural, a hawk would be swooping down a long time ago. All right, so you are way past nature when you're talking about a pet that comes into a veterinary office. The hawk, yeah, would there have been pain? Would there have been fear? Would there have been suffering? Perhaps, but it would have been pretty brief compared to what we do with the medicalization of our pets and what we do with the medicalization of ourselves. So I don't want to go down the road of saying predation is a bad thing. Predation is a natural thing. It's part of the way living communities balance themselves around the world. And we take out predators, and then we say, oh, there are too many deer. Let's go kill them. And that's because we've ruined the balance, the natural balance that would have curbed the deer population. So there is an argument that it's out there that vegans have a responsibility to stop carnivores, almost like purpose breed them, not GMO, but purpose breed animals so that they no longer predate, right, other animals, so that free living animals in general have such a nasty, brutish, and short life that should.
That's what they say. I mean, vegan gains, Nick the Nutrivore, stuff like that.
See, I'll just say, to me, that's very much Anthropocene thinking.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So the comment was, there's so many people who never get to experience that all because they don't know it's there, because they're busy with their video games, or they don't care. This is exactly why I think the hike leading and the bird spotting is so important, because here's what they think if they're going hiking on a Wednesday night. They may not care, but they're going hiking on a Wednesday night for exercise because they know they're getting older and, we need to preserve our health. So we know that there's the hike every Wednesday. We better be there because it's a nice long 6 or 7 mile hike up and down 2 mountains, right? So we really do a good hike, and they're there, and that's the entry point. Once the awe is sparked, because those people that don't care probably aren't going to respond to fear, and they're not responding to fear. It's amazing what's going on with homes, destruction of homes right now throughout the continent, throughout the world, and people are not changing. They're not connecting the dots between the wildfires and the floods and the stronger hurricanes and what they're eating and how much they're shopping and how much they're consuming and how they're getting from place to place, and their whole feeling about nature, that disconnect from us and nature. They don't understand the Anthropocene. This is why the name Anthropocene is so important, because it's a conversation starter. Because many people, because we have been brought up in a human-dominated society, don't realize it because we live and breathe it every minute. So how do we have a concept that there's a human-dominated society? We just know what we know. But then when we step back and say thousands of years and see what humans have done, understand what the Anthropocene debate is, and who's saying what about it, then we start to think about ourselves as connected to a collective. Here's another way of looking at it. Gus Speth, environmentalist, worked with the UN with the Sustainable Development Goals, climate scientist, said, I used to think that if we had enough information, I'm paraphrasing, science would change people. Give them the scientific information and they will change. I was wrong. What people need to change is what people need is a cultural and spiritual shift. And we scientists don't know how to do that. So here's Gus Speth, S-P-E-T-H. You can find the quote online. Gus Speth saying, I thought science had the answer. I thought we were giving it to you. Well, you gave us the information and we need that. But what we need is a cultural and spiritual shift. And when I saw that, I realized, because I'm very much involved in law, I've thought that I have 2 law degrees. One of them is in environmental law. And I did it because I thought that law would be the shift, that we could have something called, as in Cormac Cullinan's words, wild law, the law that respects the wild, that we could do this. And I looked at that and I said, wow, I could have had a V8. This is it's about a cultural and spiritual shift. It's going to happen in cultural and spiritual communities. That's where it's going to come from. That's where regular people are going to experience the shift. As Patricia Ferry said, we haven't got a lot of time. I personally, everybody's experiencing this differently. I personally want to commit, the way I committed to veganism 40 years ago. I want to commit my life every day to the extent possible. And by the way, I love this. I'm very happy doing this, to becoming a primate and to sharing the awe I have for other living communities and myself as a participant. And humanity is a participant rather than a dominator. What we can be, what humans have to be if we're going to sustain ourselves as a respectful community who doesn't overreach its boundaries. Because we can't keep living like this. We have exceeded the operating boundaries for Earth. Kathy will tell you. Empathy. Empathy. I went vegan in 1983. Why did I go vegan? I met a vegan. I had never heard the word before. I went to a concert and somebody had put all these pamphlets on all the seats in the concert. I was going to see a new wave band. I was very excited about it. Somebody gave me the money to get the ticket to go to this concert, so it was important to me. But like these pamphlets distracted me. And they were about all the ways we use animals every day. And the winter was coming up, so that there was an emphasis on the winter holidays. And so all the ways animals would be used in the winter holidays. So fur coats as gifts, for example, puppies, the dinner.
Thanksgiving.
geese, turkeys. All these things, the races people would watch on New Year's and so forth, the special activities that involve exploitation of animals. Just this pamphlet was full of every way, it seemed. It was a little capsule of every way we used animals. And I wanted to find out who did it, like who would come to a concert and do this. And I saw somebody with a bag on their back. And I met Robin Lane, who had gone vegan 1 year earlier. And I'm Robin Lane's first convert that we know of. And we have kept in touch for 40 years. I didn't even go to the concert. I only heard it when the door would like open and shut, when somebody would go in. And I was just listening to this person describe their experience with veganism and how it was about, like, our whole lives were about dominating animals. Our whole lives, and we didn't notice that it was domination and subordination. And I said to Robin, I said, you know, one of the key things about me that I identify myself as is a feminist. And I said, so you're basically telling me that I'm not one, because I've been a member of the master class all this time, and I can't live with that and also with my identity as a feminist. And Robin, you know, said, I didn't really know what you were talking about, but like I absorbed it and I thought about it later. And Robin became a feminist, you know, and I became a vegan. And I was very fortunate that night because I just said, where do I start? And Robin said, where do you work? And I said, at this pub on the corner. Robin said, I'll see you for lunch tomorrow. Robin took me back to where I lived and went through my fridge. I had a coach, but I said I had to do it because Robin was concerned about possibly being imprisoned because of these chickens taken from this farm, you know, and it was just in a few days, and I might never see this person again. And I was very concerned about it. And I said, so the chickens in this farm, Robin said, no, I didn't take them. And I said, so who took them? And Robin said, people I know, but they have jobs and they have kids, and I don't. So I said I did it. And I said, let me get this straight. Your friends, their kids, matter to you so much that you're going to go and possibly take a prison sentence for them. The chickens they took matter so much that Robin said, yes, I would have done it, so I'm just as responsible, although I wasn't there. I could have done it and I would have done it. And I said, so the chickens and your friends are both that important to you to make that kind of sacrifice? And Robin said, yes. I said, I want your understanding of the world. Show me, you know, how to do this. That was 1983, and I guess I could say I went vegan overnight because I committed during a conversation.